Hi there, and welcome to Enterprise AI Defenders, a show that highlights how enterprise security leaders are using innovative technologies to stop the most sophisticated cyber attacks. In each episode, Fortune 500 CISOs share how AI has changed the threat landscape, real-world examples of modern attacks, and the role AI will play in the future of cybersecurity. I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI.
And I'm Mike Britton, the CIO of Abnormal AI.
Today on the show, we're bringing you a conversation with Amy Herzog, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Amazon Web Services. AWS is the world's largest cloud provider, and its active defense systems process more than 400 trillion network flows every day. That scale makes Amy one of the few people who can say what AI genuinely changes for defenders and what it doesn't. A few things stuck with me from this conversation. First, Amy points agents at the most repetitive, pattern-based work first, so her people stay focused on the problems that actually need context and creativity. Attackers still want the same things. What's changed is the speed and cost of getting them. Second, Amy thinks vulnerability management is about to change dramatically. When a comprehensive scan across your whole system takes minutes and costs almost nothing, you can't defend a 30-day patch cycle anymore. And finally, Amy thinks AI agents should not be treated like humans. Agents are trained to seek a goal, not to fear consequences, which means the controls we've leaned on for years have quietly stopped working. We need entirely new identity and authorization models built for them. Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining today. Do you mind sharing a little bit with our audience about your role and kind of what you do and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Amy. I am the CISO for AWS here at Amazon. That means I care for the security of our customers, of AWS customers. I work on a larger Amazon security team under Steve Schmidt, Amazon's top-level CSO. And this is a fun job because AWS has really included security as a key customer success criteria or business result from the first days that we were building the cloud. And that was a pretty big technology change. And this is another one. So it's a fun time to be in this role. Before this, I joined Amazon a little over 3 years ago now as our CISO for our specialized businesses, which is a nice way to say the things that are not the cloud or the bookstore. So that included a bunch of fun stuff like our Alexa devices, our Kindles, our satellite, broadband satellite internet company, our movie studio, like just a bunch of really interesting and neat businesses.
When we think about kind of like AI's kind of ability to kind of really help and support kind of defenders, right, and help with security, what are some of the areas you feel like are kind of like the promise of like AI is really kind of holding up, and what are some areas that we need to kind of be more thoughtful about, maybe where we need to invest more as kind of a global security team?
To give our audience the sense of scale, we process over 400 trillion network flows a day as part of our active defense systems. And so like, you're not doing that if a human is looking at a dashboard for everything, right? That's just not the way I do my job. And so that led us, as AI grew more capable and it was clear that there was benefit here, we already could sort of fit it into our ordinary practice of, okay, what is the most kind of repetitive or volume-based or pattern-based work that we're doing? Let's see what new chunk of that type of work this technology can help us do at machine speed so that we can keep our human brains focused on the places that really require that local context and creativity and kind of human engagement. And so that was the pattern that we have been using for a long time to make automation pragmatic across our work program. And that's really what we've done with AI as well. It's not like it's radically changing any of the fundamentals of, attacks or what attackers or threat actors are after, or how we, the fact that we need to defend, kind of changing the specifics in a way that I see as a continuation of a broader pattern.
Being performance is like a big part of what you do. And so does it kind of unlock new opportunities to kind of approach problems in new ways?
Yeah, I think it does. For us and for threat actors, I think the thing that's really changing in this moment is the speed and scale at which things can happen. And there's an interesting kind of economic aspect of that for threat actors and for defense teams. But I think a more direct answer to your question is that it gives us a new ability to expand the volume and depth to which we're carrying out kind of large pattern-based work. So if you think about a thing that any security team needs to do, which is to take in some set of potential issues and then understand how the kind of local prioritization across those issues based on your particular systems, your particular configurations, that process has been one where AI has really helped us increase the speed at which we can deeply understand the full volume of issues. If you think about a CVE intake queue or something like that, you can really get deep eyes or more sophisticated analysis on a much broader set of potential issues much more quickly than you could before. So that's like one specific example of that.
What would be your kind of advice to maybe CISOs out there about where are the areas to kind of look, where are the areas that are most ripe for investment? And, how do you kind of make sure you're actually injecting technology or new tools or process in a way it's going to achieve the benefit without kind of maybe creating like too much complexity?
Yeah, I'm often kind of in the middle, which is frustrating sometimes for people. But in this, I'm kind of in the middle, right? I think that there's some skepticism amongst technology practitioners for anything I think that captures the public imagination, and I think there's some real durable, tangible benefit that really shouldn't be skepticked away. So I understand both sides of that. I think my advice would be to think about places first where you have the ability to understand the quality, the false positives, false negatives, or precision and recall for your human activity. And then you can build a system where you can kind of understand comparatively, what is this better at? What is it worse at? How do we need to rethink the way we're doing this process so that human engagement can effectively be scaled by this technology instead of just automating what you do today without really worrying about any of that stuff. So I don't know. Trust but verify. Am I still allowed to say that in 2026?
So basically you're saying kind of focus on something that's kind of like measurable so you can be clear what the real impact is, and maybe avoid some of the shiny tool syndrome.
Yeah, because that will help you with your agility over time. With this field changing so much so quickly, it's very important to be able to ground yourself in what you're really trying to do for your customers and your business. And the best way to do that is to have a set of measures that you can kind of go back to over time to keep you centered on what's really working, what's not working. It'll help you adapt.
You're working on cybersecurity, but also you have kind of internal exposure to new AI products, right? And probably can imagine like new potential threat vectors or kind of worries. Are there anything that's been like surprising, right? Or as you guys have kind of exposed to maybe kind of some new frontiers ahead of maybe some of your peers, are there any kind of lessons or insights there about kind of new risks or maybe new way of approaching kind of some of these threats that seem like quite promising?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things, but let me start by talking a little bit about what's not changed. So the threat actor motivations, their goals have not changed. Like credentials, data, system access, like the things that were interesting to a threat actor are still interesting to a threat actor. And really what we've seen throughout this whole last few years is that the speed and the cost to get those things is where we're seeing the real difference. And that's for them as well as for us. And so as you think about how that works inside a security program, talking to, my peers and other security teams, a lot of muscle memory that we've built up as a field for how to accomplish this job well, that muscle memory needs to adapt to the changes in cost and scale, because you might have assessed something as difficult or expensive and hence unlikely and taken one risk mitigation approach 5 years ago, whereas that's no longer necessarily appropriate. And so we saw that bear out in our own processes internally too. Like I don't forget however many years ago it was now, but the first time you have a conversation with your builder partners, it's saying like, that's not actually all that hard anymore. That's a different conversation, right? And so really making sure that you're understanding and keeping up with what state of the art or state of the practices, and then making sure you're communicating that to your business so that they are with you in this problem solving moment, rather than it setting up a tension. Those are both super important.
What are things you're seeing more of, or things that maybe kind of, again, as a civilizational defenders, we should kind of start paying more attention to make sure we're kind of focusing on the right things for kind of the next chapter of the threat landscape?
I am focused on speed, and in particular, making sure that my team has the creativity room in their day-to-day operations to keep up with how things are changing. So if I think about sort of what I'm evaluating my team on, and like really asking them to show me and discussing with my business partners now versus 4 or 5 years ago, I'm quite focused on details about the speed of our actions, particularly proactively. I think that's really key. This was always important to us internally, but now it's even more important to us. And that I'm making sure that my humans are able to bring their kind of best critical thinking, human creative side to their job.
Any kind of pro tips, any kind of like rituals or traditions, or maybe kind of best practices that kind of you found that's like helpful, kind of on your team to really keep the team focused on the customer, keep innovating, right? Like, any pro tips for us, aspiring team leaders out there?
2 core mechanisms across all of Amazon, including in security, are our business reviews and our ops reviews. And in my business reviews, you have to explicitly look not just at the end format that you might want to discuss with the board or, your business leaders or whoever else the security team is reporting to, but details around your security achievement and your work program that help you audit and inspect as a leader. So one crisp example there is you might report out from an SLA perspective because that's a shared industry language around vulnerability management. In my BR, I'm interested in time to recover or time to mitigate. And I want to not only see the mean, because everything, like the mean doesn't really tell you the shape of your work program, right?
It's all you do the histogram.
That's right. That's right. In particular, I want my 10th percentile. How good can we possibly be? And I want my 99th percentile. Like, what's the longest pole? So that's like one example of how I would recommend any CISO look internally at what you're doing, a shift. And another is in our operations reviews, we really do look at how much time are people spending, on their more rote operational tasks. On average, do we have the ability to innovate? How many failed experiments have we had? If that number is 0, something's wrong, right? And then if you want a couple of questions to just start talking through with your teams to get the start, I would definitely ask, what are you building? What do you need to learn next? What would have to be true for us not to need to spend so much effort to do this task or that task? That will just start to excite some ideas around that innovation that can be helpful. And those are all pretty common practice inside Amazon.
What are some maybe kind of the upcoming trends that you think are most important that you would kind of encourage your team or kind of other teams to really maybe kind of over-invest some attention to right now?
One topic that I'm quite passionate about that I think we're still early days in is that I think AI agents and agentic action needs to be treated differently at a fundamental level from either system action or human action. So I think when you first start playing around with agents, it can be tempting to think about them as the other form of non-determinism that we have in our lives, which is humans. And they are really not. Their motivations are totally different. They do not have any notion of eventual consequence, which is key to a lot of controls on human behavior. Like, you don't want to get fired, so you're not going to take down, this or that. Agents just don't think that way. They are trained to seek a goal. And I think what that means as a security team is that we need to be very thoughtful right away and kind of shift our thinking about what it means to do risk management with this kind of autonomy, and to give yourself the ability to treat it entirely differently. So I might think about a human as having either role or attribute-based permissions, or authorization. I might think about a system's deterministic behavior as something I can tightly constrain. And agents share bits of each, but are not the same as either. And so internally, we're spending a lot of time thinking about and developing new permissioning models, new identity models, such that we can get the different security picture these new types of principles need.
When it comes to securing AI agents, what are some things you think people kind of maybe overestimate or underestimate?
I think it's weird to be a security person saying this. There's a lot of nuance here, but I'll say maybe the spicy thing first. I want to make sure that we hold them to the appropriate bar. Humans are not perfect. And so refusing to get the benefits out of agents until they can perform, at a state that we want them to be better than humans, obviously better, we want perfect security performance, but I think there needs to be a discussion about, and measures, which is, I guess, why I talked about it earlier, around how good are they performing? Is it better than humans? Even if it's not perfect, how do we feel about that risk? And I think I see a lot of kind of instant, the moment an agent makes a mistake, we're done with the whole technology.
Right. As if humans have never hallucinated something, right? Made a mistake.
Right. These are things you need to control for and, risk manage and understand deeply. But I think we can do that, right? If you measure the efficacy of what your overall systems, even without AI agents, is doing, and then you understand how agents fit into that, you'll be able to take a more pragmatic path forward. So that's one where I think maybe we're, as a field, we over-index on perfection versus understanding the deeper detail. I think we underappreciate how tightly our controls are matched to a human deterministic system context. So we're definitely seeing it's deep in the grooves of the security field to rely on controls like asking, "Are you sure?" Or on some level, relying on that consequence anticipation as the behavior inhibitor. And I think that is not going to serve us well. And I would like us to stop thinking about these as human or human attached, because that tempts us mentally to kind of put a bunch of goals and, consequence driving attribution onto those agents that I think is not warranted and not true.
While we're on the topic, any other spicy Amy takes? I feel like these are the most interesting.
I think vulnerability management is going to change dramatically. And I think, the biggest thing we're seeing so far is speed. And the speed and low cost at which you can do a fairly comprehensive search across a system. And all of this, anyone listening, it can do right away, by the way. Opus 4.7, for example, is a great tool to either augment harness or auto harness for security work. So there's lots of this that's really practical for anyone listening. And you can see for yourself, how quickly you can look across your own properties and find stuff. And I think that's going to be true writ large. And that means that we can't talk about 30-day patch cycles anymore. That's just not commensurate with the threat of the near future. And that's such a profound difference, right? Talking about a month versus minutes is a really big change. And so I think that's going to have pretty impactful consequences on the field and how we think about operating.
How do you think we have to evolve, right? Or what do you think needs to change for us to survive in this world where there could be a novel attack every day that is on a new vector we couldn't imagine yesterday?
I think that the easiest or most pragmatic answer is that just start understanding how your response looks in terms of minutes. Just do it. It'll be illuminating. It's frightening to start thinking about maybe, but it'll be illuminating and will help you drive what you need in your teams super fast. But I don't think that's the actual answer, because that's still a fundamentally reactive cycle, like you said. And in the proactive side of this equation, which is, I think, how the industry is going to need to adapt, I think it was a less usual thing when I first took this job. for proactive teams to really exist and be launch blocking and be like engaged with builders all the way through. The shift left was kind of an aspirational dream. I think that's where the center of our work is going to need to be. And that means that process has to be embedded throughout the developer workflow. Like one of the things that's true of my team is that we are builders alongside AWS builders. And I think that's going to need to be true for all security teams, that you need to you can't just think about a point in time check anymore. You have to make sure that the system that's producing the code is producing good code. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about and investing in right now is that a lot of the security industry approach has been focused on this reactive view of okay, well, what are all of the things a bad guy could do? And then how do we think about mitigating those? What are the paths, et cetera? I'm moving toward a more proactive version of that too, which is what are the invariants that need to be true of this system? What do we want to always happen? This, any flow must have multi-factor authentication or whatever it is for your particular thing. And then looking at verifying that, which is also quite a fundamental shift.
Yeah, how do you strike the balance between trying to, deal with the overwhelming skill of the new attacks coming in, but also trying to kind of get ahead of things? Like, how do you, how would you advise maybe one of your peers to think about that?
Yeah, first you want to just be respectful that that's real, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got to acknowledge the reality, I guess, is step one.
I think. But the second thing, the more hopeful thing, is we were actively defending against 400 trillion network flows a day before AI, right? And so it feels overwhelming, and that's super real. But there's lots of very pragmatic, near-term, well-understood things we can do and you can do in order to get yourself the kind of speed of operations and scale of operations that you're going to need. The key thing to focus on to unlock that for any company roots to business owner support and partnership. So if your CEO is not thinking, I need to really watch out for my security team and make sure they're able to scale to meet this moment, I'd better ask them what they need. That's a thing to work on first. Because once you have that partnership with the business, it's much easier to do what you might need to do to your own security team, whether that's hire scientists or software developers to help you scale, whether that's evaluating a different selection of vendor products or infrastructures or architectures you can build. Each team will look a little different in terms of what your bottleneck or your constraint is, but the unblocker is making sure that your CEO or your business leader is there asking you, okay, we're going to meet this moment together. What does it take?
It's something like what gets you excited, motivated, and what makes you feel positive about the bright future.
Yeah, I am a deeply optimistic person. I think in the short term, we're going to have a bunch of really interesting challenges to solve short order, but that's okay. I love hard jobs and I love innovation. And we've got the best possible set of folks to work on these challenging problems. And how meaningful and motivating to make such a difference in the world,
I do.
I'm so optimistic about that. I think particular cause for optimism is that is two things. One, our security practitioner adoption of this technology and use of it in our day-to-day world will bring us as a field closer to the builders we are trying to sort of work through to protect our customers. So instead of us speaking an entirely different language and having an entirely different frame of reference, I see this as a step closer to what our internal customers do. And I think that's a very positive and optimism generating step. My developers don't want to give this up. My developers don't want to slow down. So it creates that commonality. And the second thing that gives me optimism is that I think the ROI and the business decisions around investing in security foundations and the kind of successful scaled practices, this is the moment for us to make and succeed at that argument. There is this kind of broader awareness of how important it will be to get things right at the foundation and build on that strong foundation. And that's something, I have personally believed true throughout my career, that AWS has believed true from the beginning and built into the cloud that we created. And now also, I think the broader industry is kind of looking at this problem with fresh eyes and seeing the same things that we do. So I'm very optimistic that based on those, we're going to be able to do something pretty cool in the next little while.
All right, so Amy, we only got maybe 10 minutes left. So we'd like to end our episodes with what we call a lightning round, which I know is not super original. And basically I'm going to ask you a couple questions that are very hard to answer succinctly, but looking for like kind of the one tweet response. So please don't totally hate me if these are too challenging. But I know you like challenges, so I'm
here for it.
Okay, if you can only share one principle with every CISO, but something you've learned from your career the hard way, what would it be?
You have to keep the threat actor and their capabilities at the center of everything that you're doing.
What's your advice for security leaders to kind of just stay up to date with the latest technology trends?
In this moment, I think talking to one another and your peers is one of the better ways to stay up to date. And I would recommend augmenting that with a periodic random search of grad student publications in this field.
So maybe switching gears to a more personal side, is there a book you've read that's had a big impact on kind of you and your leadership? And if so, I'd love to hear what and why.
Getting this to a tweet will be hard, but let me give it a shot. I think particularly for CISOs at this level of leadership, there are two that I would recommend. Measure What Matters is a classic. Ooh, maybe three. Right. Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and making sure that your team is acting as a coordinated team instead of the heads of their functional silos is super important for the CISO role in this moment. And the last is a newer bit of work by one of my MIT professors, actually, called Step Up, Step Back. And it's about how, as a senior leader, to figure out how to set the vision and the measures correctly so that you can get the benefit of your team's innovation rather than being very focused on prescribing the how that your teams are doing their work, which takes away their agency and autonomy.
What do you think will be true about the future of AI and cybersecurity that most people today would consider science fiction?
The obvious answer is autonomous attack and defense systems, where as security professionals, kind of operating at the more strategic advancement level. Feels like science fiction, but seems on the path that we're on.
Like, what would be your advice or kind of guidance to maybe that person that's just thinking about either getting into cybersecurity, maybe they're already there, they're trying to kind of step up in a bigger impact? What would be kind of, coaching that you'd share with them?
Absolutely. Get hands-on with all of the tools, figure out a local experiment you want to run or thing you want to learn, and just do. This is not a moment where you can read and fully prepare for the change that's happening all around us.
If you're a CISO listening and you believe in like this AI stuff's really be helpful, but you're kind of unclear where to start, what would be kind of like your first 1, 2, 3 kind of, like best projects to kind of kick off to just put some points on the board and also like show the team what's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I would start by looking at the portions of your work that have 2 characteristics. It is, you have a huge volume of it, or it's fairly pattern-based or repetitive, and it is eating up the operational day-to-day of the humans you want thinking about the bigger problems. The sweet spot is when you have both of those things, because it is both going to make your teammates' jobs more interesting, and it is going to give you a kind of deep practice with what this stuff is good at.
Any other advice for kind of like AI quick wins for their peers out there just trying to have an immediate impact on their security operations?
Yeah, have a little fun with it. It's worth the time to have a little fun. But if you want to nudge it in a productive direction, ask your teammates, ask yourself, what are you learning? And really hold yourself accountable for sort of writing that down. And that will also kick the iteration off more quickly.
Amy, really appreciate you making time to chat. Really enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Evan. It was a pleasure.
That was Amy Herzog, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Amazon Web Services.
I'm Mike Britton, the CIO of Abnormal AI.
And I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI. Thanks for listening to Enterprise AI Defenders. Please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Learn more about how AI is transforming cybersecurity at enterprisesoftware.blog.
This show is produced by Abnormal Studios. See you next time.